Volkswagen thinks that their new ID.4 is an electric vehicle for car buyers that don't even know they want an electric car yet. This might look like just another SUV, but Volkswagen envisions that this family EV could take the world by storm. With an estimated range of 260 miles, generous interior space, and a starting price at around $40,000 before incentives, is the ID.4 going to convince families to go electric? Today, let's investigate. The ID.4 is the first Volkswagen built from the ground up as an EV, at least for the US market. And Volkswagen really wants you to know that this is an important car for them. They really want you to know that this is meant to be a direct competitor to those top-selling SUVs like the RAV4 and CR-V. Spec for spec and dollar for dollar, it looks decently competitive, at least on paper. In the States, there's two models at the moment, the Pro, which is what I have here, and the Pro S. There was a first edition that sold out already, so if you want that, sorry, it's gone. The Pro is the lower end model, and it's actually not that low end, even though it's the base model, technically right now, in the lineup, it's actually pretty well equipped. The Pro S gives you a few additional features like sunroof, a larger infotainment screen, and a few other things, but in terms of how they compare, they've got the same battery pack, they got the same acceleration, that kind of thing. So if you want to save a little bit of money, go with the Pro. If you want a few more luxuries, go with the Pro S. All right, let's talk about the design. In the front, it looks a touch futuristic, a little bit chunky, but overall it's not bad. I actually really like this white bar right here. I like how it continues from the headlights all the way across. It's got this white VW logo, which looks pretty nice. Now from the side, it looks like just about any other crossover or SUV. It's not that distinctive, not that memorable, but really, are any crossovers or SUVs really all that memorable? Doesn't look bad, it just kind of blends in. Now the rear is pretty nice, looks okay. I really dig this light bar back here, which if you look closely, it's got all these cool diamonds that are sort of embedded in the light, which that's a pretty neat touch. I'm a big fan of the white emblem. This unpainted plastic piece, it's not my favorite, but I do like the back of this car, and overall, I appreciate the simple, clean, and minimalistic lines that this thing has going on. We should also probably talk about this color. It's called Moonstone Gray, sort of a non-metallic, almost primer-looking gray. Now, a lot of people have come up to me and said how much they like this color. It is pretty neat. But if you don't like monochrome, you're out of luck, at least for the Pro model. It only comes in gray, white, silver, and black. Boring. How about some fun colors? With the Pro S, you can get a few more grays, a couple more silvers, and red and black. Woohoo! But you know, nothing really all that exciting. All right, let's talk about the vibe in here. It's open, it's airy, it's spacious. Volkswagen's really good at making cars that feel like they're a lot more open. There's a very low belt line here, so you got a really good view out of the sides. You don't feel claustrophobic, you don't feel closed in this car, which I really like because there's quite a few new crossovers where you feel like you're driving a cave, and this is nothing like that. This feels pretty open. This vehicle is actually about the same size as the Toyota RAV4 or a Honda CR-V, but it feels bigger. So it does appear to be a very well-constructed interior. I wouldn't say it's luxurious. It doesn't really have that vibe. It has a minimal vibe. It has a simple vibe. It's actually quite nice, quite comfortable, and it's a really nice place to be. You can certainly get more luxurious interiors at this price point, but when you consider the whole package, when you consider the fact that this is an electric car, a pretty inexpensive electric car, I think overall you'll be very happy with what you're getting here. Now we have a leather-wrapped steering wheel, but no leather anywhere else. These are cloth seats, and actually, I think I would take these over the leather. They seem like they're gonna be incredibly durable. These seats are incredibly comfortable. They're great for a long road trip. There's good adjustability. It's partially power. You actually have to manually move it front and back. That's not a big deal. They're heated, got a really good driving position. Oh, and armrests. They're padded, they're super comfortable, and you can actually lock them into different positions. I'm not really sure why you'd ever need this position, but you can do it. You've got some soft touch materials, but there are a few areas of scratchy plastics, and there's a whole lot of gloss black in here, which as you know, will show fingerprints and scratches very easily. So there's gloss black right over here by the door handle, so you're constantly touching this. It constantly gets grungy. All this stuff that you're pressing and swiping up here, that's gonna get grungy and dusty. You've got this ambient light feature, which is more noticeable at night. I have mine set to pink and purple. That's what my daughter wanted it set to, but it looks pretty cool. So one cool feature about the ID.4 is if you've got your key with you and you sit in the car turns on. You don't have to press anything. Step on the brake and then the car will be ready to drive. All you gotta do is twist this rocker, forward for drive or B mode, or back for reverse. And the park button is right here on the side. So once you get the muscle memory for using this thing, it's actually pretty easy to use. The first couple times I accidentally turn on the windshield wipers because it's really close to that, but once you get it, it's actually pretty well implemented. And then let's say you want to get out. All you got to do is exit the vehicle, then the car turns off, which is pretty neat. So let's say you want to just get out real quick to shut a gate or to grab your mail. It will always shut off as soon as you leave the vehicle. Today it's 105 degrees and the air conditioning turns off as soon as I leave the car. If your significant other is sitting in the passenger seat or your kids are in the back, they're gonna have to try to scramble up here to turn the thing back on. It's a cool feature that works in some situations but really doesn't work in others. So also right in front of me is this driver pod, I guess you call it, and it's pretty cool because it moves along with the steering wheel. What I really like about it is that it's simple, easy to read, and it doesn't have a whole lot of superfluous information on it. It's got your speed, it's got your range, it's got your driver aid status, and if you have navigation on, it can show that up there as well. In terms of storage, there's a lot of space in here. The door pockets are pretty huge. You've got this cup holder section up here where you can take the cup holders out, which is pretty neat. This is a nice spot to store things if you don't want to have your cups up there. Sort of strange that they have this area down here with no pockets or no non-slip surface. I guess you could throw a small bag under there. And then down here, you've got wireless charging. You've got 2 USB-C ports and then a cup holder, which also can be taken out. So for this wireless charging area, on some very, very curvy roads, my phone would slide around in there and then it would stop charging and then I would get a message up here that said, hey, your phone's not charging. So then I'd have to kind of reset it. And then I actually tried it without my case. It was sort of the same thing. So I guess if you have a very slippery case, you might have a couple issues on a really windy road. This section right here, it leaves a few things to be desired. Let's talk about it. There's some good stuff here. There's some really good stuff here, but there's a few things here that not that great. So this infotainment system looks great. The resolution's really good. It's relatively responsive. It's not the best, but it's not terrible. And what I really like is this home button here. It's sort of mimicking like the home button on CarPlay. Everything's laid out very well. It's very easy to find things. The menus make a lot of sense. This 10-inch screen is standard, though you can get a 12-inch screen on the Pro S. And it has a capacitive touch panel below it to change temperature and volume and quickly access the parking camera and the drive mode screens. But so much of what you interact with in this vehicle, whether it's the steering wheel or it's this screen up here, they're not actual buttons. Some activate via swiping, and some need to be pressed, and some provide haptic feedback, so you hear a little click when you press them, and some don't provide that feedback. So it's kind of strange. It's kind of a mishmash. So one thing you can't do is you can't rest your hand right here on this ledge while you're pressing any of these buttons on the screen, because you could turn up or down your stereo. And what I did a couple times by accident when I was trying to press this, I accidentally engaged the heated seats. Now, the heated seats is engaged by double pressing both the cold and the hot buttons. And I didn't know that initially, because when you actually want to press the heated seat icon on the screen, it doesn't do anything. It took me a while to figure out how to turn that off. So when you're interacting with this thing, you just kind of have to be a little cautious to not press anything that you don't mean to press. So you'll know that there's only one physical climate control button in this vehicle, but all of the climate settings happen up here as well. So in terms of climate control, let's assume that it's off. You might think, oh, I could just press these buttons right here to turn the temperature up. No, those don't do anything. It says off. So those buttons, when the climate control is off, those buttons are useless. So then you click Clima and you think, okay, well, I'll adjust it on the screen. I'll adjust the temperature here on the screen. No, that doesn't work either. What you have to do, you have to get used to this, is this little tiny power button right here in the corner, which turns on the climate control system. And then you can adjust your climate. Once you understand how to use it, it's fine. It's just a lot of time with your eyes off the road. If you could remove a couple steps, so maybe just pressing this button would actually turn on the system without having to press climate and then the power button, I think that would be a lot better. It's also got this smart climate button right here, which I guess is for people that have never driven a car before. You're just like, my feet are cold, I better turn on warm feet. I guess it's kind of cool. It certainly would maybe reduce the number of presses that you need to take. But in general, a lot of what's going on here is sort of just different for the sake of being different and not necessarily different for the sake of being better. One great thing is that we've got wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. So that way you don't have to be fumbling with cables down here. That's awesome. So another thing we need to talk about are these window controls. And if you've seen other videos about the ID.4, you'll probably already know about this. There are 4 windows in here, but only 2 buttons. In order to operate the rear windows, you need to press and hold this rear button, and then you can open and close the rear windows. If you want to open the fronts, you have to either wait for this to time out, or then you have to press this again. It's kind of hard to get it just right. A light press doesn't do it. You have to do kind of a longer press. I think like most people, I'd rather just have 4 switches. This is another one of those cases where I think it's different for the sake of being different, not better. But I will say this, once you start to understand the limitations, you start to understand the quirks, and you really kind of get a feel for how some of this stuff works, it does start to get a little bit better with time. So one really cool feature is this light bar here on the front. It's called the ID light, and it can respond to your voice commands. It illuminates when you're using the navigation, or it can illuminate red when you're about to crash into somebody. Lets you know you should probably be braking, and it also lights up when you're charging the vehicle. So here in the back, there's loads of room. It's got a flat floor, so you could even fit 3 adults back here pretty comfortably. I'm 6'3", and even in the center seat, wow, this is like the most comfortable center seat I've been in a very long time. I've got lots of headroom, decent leg room. This is spacious. This is really nice. I have my front seat set for myself at 6'3", and as you can see, I still got like 3 or 4 inches right here. Piano black right over here again, which is gonna get all smudgy and gross, especially if you have kids. But yeah, very, very impressed with this back seat. Oh, you also get 2 USB-C ports and vents back here, which is pretty nice. The latch anchors down here are easy to get to. They have these little folding covers, which is nice. No problem there if you need to put it in a car seat. And even with a rear-facing car seat, you're gonna have no problem fitting that in here. Won't even need to move these front seats up. All right, let's take a look in the back here. We've got 30 cubic feet of cargo space with those rear seats folded up. In this little compartment under here, you can store your charging cable. You've got 64 cubic feet of cargo space with those rear seats folded down. It's larger than a Mustang Mach-E, but not as big as something like a Toyota RAV4. No power liftgate on this model. In the front, we've got no frunk, which is kind of a bummer. It would have been great to store the charging cable up here instead of in the back, which could be covered by cargo. All right, let's see how this thing accelerates. That's not bad. That level of acceleration is likely going to be impressive for somebody that maybe has never driven an EV before. If you've never experienced the instant torque of an electric motor, this is gonna feel pretty impressive. But if you've driven a Tesla, if you've driven even a Nissan Leaf, many other EVs are gonna be quite a bit quicker than this thing. So while it might feel a bit sluggish compared to other EVs, it's actually perfectly in line with what you might expect from something like a RAV4, a CR-V, or a Forester. I'm sure Volkswagen could have given us Tesla-like neck-snapping acceleration, but they're clearly aiming at that mainstream SUV customer, and things like cargo space and comfort are going to be higher on the priority list than neck-snapping acceleration. So propelling this ID.4 is a single electric motor, single-speed transmission. This car is actually rear-wheel drive, and we've got 201 horsepower and 229 pound-feet of torque. So for a car that's this heavy, you know, it's like 4,600 pounds or thereabouts, that's not a ton of horsepower. That's probably why this thing doesn't feel all that quick. 0 to 60 occurs in about 7.5 to 8 seconds, which is fine. Compare that to my fleet of 80s and 90s cars, this thing is like a rocket ship. But by today's standards, for an EV, really not all that impressive. Underneath us, we've got an 82 kilowatt hour battery pack. And that battery pack is arranged in kind of a skateboard fashion, very low in the vehicle, so it's got a very low center of gravity. Those batteries weigh a lot, and you can really feel that weight, especially when the road is choppy. It can kind of jostle around a little bit. But the good thing about that low center of gravity is you never really feel all that much body lean in the turns. This thing isn't a sports car, but it never feels like it's gonna fall over itself. And although this thing is rear-wheel drive, don't expect it to be all that fun. And that makes sense again, this is not a car for enthusiasts, it's a car for families. And if you drive like a sensible human being, which for me is almost impossible, it actually is quite pleasant. So if I put it into B mode by using this rocker switch right here, now you'll get stronger brake regeneration as you let off the throttle. Now, if you're expecting to experience very strong brake regen like you might experience in something like a Nissan Leaf, you're not gonna get it here. So you can't really do one pedal driving, which is kind of a bummer because I really like doing one pedal driving in an EV. Like most vehicles nowadays, there's loads of safety tech standard on the ID.4. It's got semi-automated driver assistance features. Adaptive cruise control is standard and it works really well, though setting the speed can be a bit finicky because the steering wheel controls are kind of touchy. A hard press will adjust the speed by 5 miles an hour and a light press will adjust by 1, and it's kind of hard to get that just right. And I've used that semi-autonomous driver assist feature a few times, which includes lane keep assist. And I've noticed that lane keep assist kind of bounces you around in the lane a little bit. So that wasn't my favorite. It works pretty well, it keeps you in your lane, but the steering feel does change. Okay, so when you're buying an electric vehicle, one of the things you need to know, pretty much top of your list, is what is the range of this thing? The EPA estimates this car at 260 miles, which is decent, but it doesn't lead the pack. But if you don't drive like an idiot and you don't have a lead foot, with ordinary driving, you can definitely beat that range. Now, when you're looking to purchase an electric vehicle, you should remember that not all EVs are created equal. If you want to know how it compares to gas-powered vehicles, you can look at the MPGe rating. It's rated at 107 city, 91 highway, and 99 combined. Now, if you want to know how many kilowatt hours you're using, this is rated at 35 kilowatt hours per 100 miles. Now, I feel like 300 miles of range is maybe the magic number that might lure more people to electric vehicles. 260 is fine, especially if you can charge at home, but it can leave you with a little bit of anxiety if you want to take a longer trip. All right, let's talk about charging this thing. Most people that buy electric cars are going to be charging at home. That's really the best place to do it. It's going to be the cheapest place to do it, which is kind of a bummer that Volkswagen only gives you that level 1 charger for this thing. And it's kind of useless because it took me almost 2 days to charge this thing from 15% all the way up to 100%. Level 1 charging is great in a pinch, but I really feel like Volkswagen should have included a level 2 charger with this thing. So if you do have that level 2 charger, it should take about 7.5 hours to get this thing fully charged. Now, in terms of DC fast charging, this thing can charge at 125 kilowatts, which means you can get from 0 to 80% in about 38 minutes, which is pretty decent. And also keep in mind that some newer Teslas can charge at 250 kilowatts, which means that they can get to that 80% range quite a bit quicker. And one nice thing about charging this thing is that Volkswagen is throwing in 3 years of free charging at Electrify America stations, which is really cool. That can amount to quite a bit of money, depending on how many times you're using that charger. All right, let's talk about the price of this thing. If Volkswagen wants to sell a ton of these, if they want this to be accessible to RAV4 customers, if they want this to kind of take that sales crown away from those top-selling gas-powered cars, price is key. And this thing starts at just over $41,000 in the US, which is pretty decent considering what you get. And then if you factor in that $7,500 US federal tax credit, you're looking at about 33 grand, which at that point, this is a steal. Okay, so what vehicles are people really likely to compare this to? I would say that most likely people are going to compare this to the Mustang Mach-E and to the Tesla Model Y. Now, if you look at the similar distance versions of those cars, you'll find that the ID.4 costs quite a bit less. But of course, the others have the option to go much further on a charge. It's got slightly more cargo space than the Mach-E, but slightly less than the Model Y with its frunk. The Tesla and the Mach-E can charge faster. So what about comparably sized gas-powered SUVs? It's pretty hard to compare because the ownership experience is going to be so different. But in terms of driving experience, cargo space, features, and price, the ID.4 does stack up pretty nicely against a well-equipped RAV4, CR-V, or a Forester. Volkswagen got so much of the packaging just right. This is a mid-size SUV with a cabin space of a larger vehicle. The interior is airy and open, the seats are fantastic, and the driving experience is tranquil, which is what many crossover buyers want. The range is decent, it's reasonably efficient, and it looks pretty good too. Some of the interior controls are poorly implemented and borderline maddening, at least initially. Even with some awkward interior controls, it does seem like Volkswagen might be onto something with the ID.4. Build a reasonably practical EV that doesn't look or feel too different than a gas-powered car, and you just might be able to convert a whole bunch of buyers over to electric. The ID.4 doesn't provide the neck-snapping acceleration of a Tesla or the trendy styling of a Mustang Mach-E. The ID.4 aims to be a normal, mainstream crossover that just so happens to have an electric motor instead of a gas-powered one. Whether or not VW can lure RAV4 and CR-V buyers remains to be seen. But the allure of going electric is getting stronger every day, and the ID.4 provides a comfortable, spacious, and practical way to go zero emissions. What electric vehicle would you go for? Would the ID.4 convince you to switch from gas to electric? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video and you'd like to see more like it, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon so you can get notified of all my new car reviews, used car reviews, and updates on my fleet of weird and mostly broken 1980s and 90s cars. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're well, and I'll see you soon.